Recording.
President, Commissioners, it's now 4:30. Time for your work sessions.
Right. Thank you, everyone, for being here. We're starting an hour early because we have two work sessions. First of which is session number 2 on our impact fee ordinance. And Gary, you're the man. I kept seeing Stacy's name up there, and I thought, am I missing something here? Gary, Kevin, Stacy, give it such an easy thing.
Thank you, Commissioners. For the record, Gary Inselman, Deputy Director of Development Technical Services, and this is our session 2 on the impact fee ordinance. So today we'll talk about the direction that what we think we received at our last session. Look at what we can revise in the impact fee ordinance under the current statute and within the time frame you've given us, and then look at a few pros and cons to those measures. So what we heard at work session on October 6th was you want to broaden the use of the impact fees, question the assumptions in the ordinance, review service areas, clarify existing deficiencies, look at pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, and then again, what can we revise in the impact fee ordinance with statute as is by June 1st. So with broaden the use of the fees, short answer is, I guess I need to know if there's something in particular you want us to look at. As we discussed on October 6th, the fees can only be used to pay for eligible expenses on projects listed in our capital improvements plan. To be listed in our capital improvements plan, we have to be able to list a specific level of quantity of use, consumption, generation, or discharge of that service unit. So
We had earlier, Gary, I believe, changed the ordinance to allow us to use the impact fees for everything the state statute will allow, correct?
President Goldthorpe, yes, we're going to show in a little bit, pushing that just a little bit further.
Sure.
Gary, I have a question. So is that second bullet, is that specific to the state statute, or is that just what's in our current ordinance?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Pickering, both. That's a requirement of the state statute.
Okay, that's the state. Okay, thanks.
If there is something you want us to specifically look at, we can do that and come back at a future session. I mean, at this point, we're looking at what we can do under our understanding of the statute as is and within our.
Mr. President, and Gary, thanks. I took up your challenge, and we've been playing with the statute. One of the things that oftentimes we'll do is we'll come up with definitions because we are using the same concepts over and over again throughout a statute or an ordinance. So I just tried to think of how could we define things, keep ourselves just as broad as we can under the statute. So I just played with this and suggested, and I know Steve gave you a copy, just played with some language, thinking instead of defining things as highway because it's in the code, as transportation right-of-way, because we own the right-of-way, or we're responsible for everything in the right-of-way, liabilities on us. Instead of getting into modes, because my reading of the statute is it's less about mode as it is about your responsibility, impacts to the transportation right-of-way. So let's use that term, continue to re-emphasize that we can only do what the statute allows us to do, then talk about it in terms of transportation right away, and then it goes to what does this new development, what kind of demand does it create on our obligations in the right of way? And then we don't have to think about what is the demand for biking, what is the demand on cars, what is the demand on all these other modes. We have an obligation, and this development, if we can quantify it, and we have a mechanism to quantify it, it's going to impact our obligation in the right of way. So I'm thinking that might be a good, and that's why I'm suggesting we might go in that direction. And then we can also then use sort of growth demand. If you can say this new growth is going to create this demand, then we don't have to lump everything in as saying, well, this is an existing deficiency. There's some aspect that is existing, but then we can say, but it's now become sort of untenable or unsafe or whatever the consequence is because of the new growth. And we can say that piece of it is not an existing deficiency. That's actually a demand that's been created by growth, so that we can get to those notions and we aren't stuck with, well, because we've broadly defined an existing deficiency. So anyway, look at those concepts and think outside. I'm just trying to think outside the box,
Right.
so that we can get to those. We're still obviously can only do what the statute allows us to do, but the terminology we use in our ordinance is not dictated entirely by the statute. So anyway, those are the things. And then the service areas is right. I think the best way to think about service areas is just start with the 7 jurisdictions, 6 cities in the county. Start with that, and then if they want to create an additional service area or combine and create one service area from multiple jurisdictions, they can do that. But we start from the standpoint that they already operate from with respect to their authority to assess impact fees for other public infrastructure. So those are the suggestions that I thought, well, how does that work? So by injecting those into the statute. If anybody likes reading ordinance language, and I know Dave does, I'll give you a copy.
That'd be probably okay, as long as we're not going to make a decision on that real quick.
This is
But what I'm concerned about is that if the first one within the right of way, okay, fine. I thought we were always doing that anyway. But the other two, if we limit that during growth, then we need to have more language in there that removes it when there's not so much growth.
Yeah.
President Goldthorpe, we can take a look at the suggestions and come back at a future date with our thoughts on those. I mean, there are reasons we use the statutory definitions. There's part of the statute that requires us to do so. So we can look at where we can modify or play with those and make alterations and where we...
A lot of the definitions I noticed aren't in the statute. We use them for our own convenience. So that's good.
And that's my question is, I don't really know what the definitions are for that third bullet. So what exactly is quantity of use, consumption, generation, or distribution? So knowing or providing the current definitions of how those are used and what those are would be really helpful for me. And then on the service area bit, I'm sure there's no one way. There's pros and cons to drawing the lines. There's going to be winners and losers and kind of tough things there's going to be tough conversations for sure. So I think knowing and having a variety of service area options, because I know we did transit corridors last time, is that correct?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Pickering, if you'll give me a couple of minutes, have some talking points
perfect.
on that.
Okay, sorry. That's all right,
finished.
perfect.
The next one said to question the assumptions in the ordinance. No specific questions were raised, so if there is something you want me to explain, like the service units and other things, I can come back and do that. If there's something else, you can let me know ahead of our next session. We can explain something I can meet with you separately if you'd like. So service areas. They are established by ACHD in the ordinance and in the CIP. So when we do those updates, would be the time to look at that. The last time they were looked at in the 2016 update, our task force did vote and recommend 8-0 that we do our single countywide service area. The CICAC then voted 8-1 to recommend to the commission that we do the single countywide service area. Some of the pros and cons, it is a countywide system. When we did discuss it with various task forces and the CICs in the past, we'd actually looked at some different options where the principal arterials were countywide, maybe the minor arterials were broken up into a service area, so they do serve slightly different functions. You know, overall, we are a relatively small county. The cities have grown together. One of the problems with having multiple service areas is our jobs housing balance, or how much we're out of balance. Still in our long-range plans, huge job growth in downtown Boise and parts to the east, not enough housing, and we have all this housing growth in the western part of the county and in Canyon County, creating all this cross-county travel, which is farther than what the service areas would be if we broke it up into 6 or 7 areas. The average trip length would cover 2 or 3 service areas, so you would have demand created by someone living over here, traveling through this service area to get their job over here. Only people paying for the projects in the middle service area are the new homes and businesses within that service area. A real life example would be if we wanted to look at city or city of area of impact plus city limits service areas, the Linder Road corridor between State and Chinden, all of those improvements would be paid for by the city of Eagle, even though its demand is created by Meridian, Star, Canyon County, other people that travel through there. So that's one way that it gets to be a little unfair if we break it up too small and you've got demand created on both sides. The only people paying are the people in the middle. Those are considerations we have to take into account, make sure we have a fair system. These don't get too out of whack, and one city isn't paying for these large regional projects that serve the county as a whole and not just their city.
So Gary doesn't, President, and Gary doesn't that, it's because our, what's eligible for impact fees is so narrow that it seems unfair. Here's West Boise trying to encourage infill development, and you know, denser activity centers and so forth. But there's 0 things in West Boise that would be eligible for those impact fees. So even though they're paying for it, nothing can be spent there. The other is, of course, the assumption is that everybody is going to have to be commuting from presumably affordable housing further and further west. And we've pretty much reached the point. They're now in Canyon County, so they wouldn't be paying for it anyway. And it's under the assumption that every single job that is created has to be, we have to assume they're going to drive there from a place they can afford based upon the pay scales of, you know, the employment center in downtown Boise, not that they would be getting there by other means, by another mode of transportation.
In order for that growth to pay for itself, we'd set up my April Fool's joke, right, Steve? That was a toll booth, folks.
Yeah.
And Gary, I think that argument, sure, I mean, I think that definitely worked in that time, but I mean, so many folks now are realizing that we have to do infill and looking at places like Garden City where none of those, that impact fee revenue that they've generated has gone to benefit their community. Because people really aren't driving from Eagle or Star, Garden City to go to a brewery. It's really folks that are walking and biking from these metro areas trying to get to where they go and want to live in that lifestyle so they can walk and bike and that sort of thing. So
Right.
I just think, like I said, there's a lot of ways to cut the pie, and I just want to make sure that it's as balanced and equitable as possible and makes sense. So
Right.
I just don't think that we can make that argument that for now this, you know, we're going to continue to see development in our rural areas And that's fine and dandy, but that's costing us more money too to maintain that infrastructure when we should be trying to incentivize growth that's already connected or easily accessed to the road network that we're already building.
And President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Pickering, you're absolutely right. And in an ideal world, these would grow from the inside out. They don't. We're hopscotching all over the county as they annex, miles away from their core. But there is another way that we can look at this. As
Jerry,
you know,
if I might, amazing you should bring that up right now and today. On the way in here this evening, there was a rather long political commercial just slamming a couple of the candidates for Meridian City Council for supporting infill.
Yeah.
Can't win for losing sometimes.
Commissioners, as you may know, Communities in Motion 2050 is underway, the update to the long-range transportation plan through Compass. They're doing a new household survey this year. It's currently underway. They haven't done one since 2012. The information gathered from that is exactly what you're talking about. Where are people driving to and from? What's the purpose of the trip? What's the mode? How many people are in the vehicle? All of this information that we need to be able to look at the aspects that you're talking about. So what I would recommend is if we want to review service areas, it should be done in the next full update that's conducted after Communities in Motion 2050 is adopted, because then we have access to this information. If we do it today, one, I don't know if I could get it done by June 1st with the different modeling and public involvement and engagement we have to do with everybody else, our stakeholders. Two, it's the same data we had since 2012. So it's the same data we used when we looked at it last 3 updates. So it would be much more beneficial if we waited till we had this new information that's being collected right now, and then as part of Communities in Motion 2050, that will be adopted in December of 22. That's the plan. So roughly 14 months from now, and then generally once they adopt the Communities in Motion update, that's when we start our major update, full update of our capital improvements plan.
I would suggest actually the flip side, because Communities in Motion will measure only what we've been able to invest in that incentivizes people to build on the outskirts. So that, for us to say, well, look, there isn't a whole lot of people using transit or walking and biking to work. Well, that's because we haven't built the infrastructure for them to do that. We don't have a comprehensive transit system. The development patterns haven't been built around that. So it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. I would suggest, in fact, that what we're ultimately going to get to is a county that we built out everything that qualifies as tax fee eligible, and then the legislature will say, well, we'll just make it dual county, so you and Ada County will pay for stuff out in Canyon County, where people are now, more and more people are coming from. And I think that's backwards. Instead, I think the reality is that when you have different service areas, you can only assess at a rate that pays for eligible, impact fee eligible infrastructure. And if we continue to have fairly limited infrastructure, impact fee eligible stuff in certain service areas, their impact fees are going to go down. And that would then force us to say, well, what do we have to do to get back to a countywide in order to make that even for everybody in the county? And that is, of course, broaden the impact fee eligibility. So I would suggest we actually go to service areas first, and that we reinforce that, in fact, we do have to have these variable rates because growth is occurring at different rates in different areas. In fact, it would incentivize the efficient investment of development in areas that already have infrastructure, and that we just need to add some less expensive infrastructure to make that work. And it would go not just for, if this helps to incentivize development where we've already paid for infrastructure, already paid for roads and sewers and all the services that are the core services that are being provided, then the rates would be lower. So that's what I would suggest. I think if we do anything, we impose we go back to our service area model, recognizing that, yes, we're going to have variable rates, and that may create some tension, but that tension is good. I think that would then force the legislature to say, well, what do we do to make sure this is more even? So developers on the edge of the county are paying roughly the same as those in the city core of Meridian or Boise or Eagle. So that's what I would suggest, rather than the other way around.
I just would need to know more about Communities in Motion 2050. Your thoughts. So either we could do a call offline, or you could provide just a little bit more detail. That would be helpful for me.
President?
Yes.
Gary, have we derailed you? Do you have more to go through? Because I have
I have a
several
little more to
things.
go through, yeah.
Okay, go ahead and do that. I have several things I'd like to say
Okay.
that I think need to be said, but please continue.
Commissioners, the existing deficiencies, again, we kind of went through some of that last time with what the statute requires us. We have to analyze the total capacity of the system or level of usage, et cetera, and list what is deficient under our planning level thresholds, and we have to commit to using other available sources of revenue to cure those. So we really don't have an option to use impact fees to cure those existing deficiencies or to remove projects from that list. If you choose not to program those projects, then that's a choice that you can make, and they wait and not be built for a while. But that's really, it comes down to a programming issue and your priorities.
Gary, but if we define deficiency as something that is triggered by increased volume or increased uses in that right of way, where it's not deficient at a certain level of activity, but it is deficient once more people are using that, can't we make that distinction instead of just lumping, well, you know, it's a road without adequate sidewalks, so that's an existing deficiency. Well, it's worked fine. It's not really a deficiency until more people are driving on it, and then it becomes unsafe, and now it is. So can't we make some distinction instead of lumping the entire thing into old and new? It's all existing.
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Hanson, as far as sidewalks go, no, we can't, because we're not paying for sidewalks with impact fees now. And, you know, if we do make a differentiation on, it's not all a deficiency or all eligible. We do have roads where it's 3-lane deficiency, so the pay to widen it from 2 lanes to 3 lanes, general fund revenue. From 3 lanes to 5 lanes is paid for from impact fees. We do that today. That's allowed and what's right, because that's what's necessitated by the new growth. The problem is that we can't use impact fees to pay for what was necessitated by past growth that we didn't keep up with. So it's our fault for not programming projects quicker and building these as the development was occurring.
Yeah. Well, I would suggest we didn't have any money back then either, because those weren't eligible for impact fees.
But at the time they were, Commissioner, and we didn't build them.
50 years ago, 100 years ago, 50 years ago, you know, the growth that occurred in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, we didn't have an impact fee ordinance until 1994, so all that growth, we didn't have an impact fee system to pay. I don't even know when we first adopted our ordinance, so.
1992.
92 is when we enacted ours. So 30 years. I have a stick.
Commissioners, if I could, on pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, I would like to suggest perhaps we look at it not in what we're not paying for, but what we are. If you look at this example, on a typical 5-lane arterial, we buy 37 feet of additional right-of-way beyond our existing 50 for pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure. That's 4.5 acres per mile we're buying just for sidewalks and bike lanes or multi-use paths, whatever facilities we're going to build. At, an average cost, that's about 900,000 per mile we're spending on that 4.5 acres. Project we're just completed or wrapping up on Eagle Road between Victory and Amity, we paid about 600,000 for the 10-foot multi-use pathways on both sides of the road. We're spending more on the right-of-way than we are on the facility, so impact fees are contributing greatly to this infrastructure, just not for the facility itself.
Along the arterials, right?
Along the arterials, and that's all we can
Not
use.
the network.
That's all
Yeah.
we can do on our impact fees, because that's what's in our capital improvements plan. So just throw that out there, that impact fees are contributing greatly to this infrastructure. And on all of our projects, when they're built, we include that infrastructure in accordance with your adopted plans, your bikeway plan, or transition plans, our standards and policies. So it's getting built. It's just that 600,000 is being spent out of the general fund. Everything else is being spent out of impact fees. If you do desire to build more pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure along the arterials, because that's what we're talking about in our capital improvements plan, you know, there are other options. I mean, we can program more CIP projects. I mean, that's a great way to get more of those miles on the arterials constructed. You want to get that ahead of the actual widening of the road or intersections. The major obstacle is the right-of-way, because we don't have it. When properties develop, we get it along the frontage of the property that develops, not the property next door, because it hasn't developed yet and we don't own the right-of-way. If you could prioritize and program, you know, some corridor preservation projects like we just did down Cloverdale in conjunction with Idaho Power. We bought 4 miles of right-of-way along the west side of that corridor to allow them to expand their infrastructure. We could go build sidewalks or pathways in that right now if we wanted to fill in gaps. We own the right-of-way on that side of the road. You could do that along other key corridors if you chose. That's the limiting factor, is the right-of-way. Or if we did that ahead of time, and then a large parcel develops, and work with them to extend it across the right-of-way that we purchased earlier from their neighbor and connect some dots. Something to consider. It's another way to look at what can we do with the impact fees that we have to help promote that without trying to change the statute and say we should be able to spend it on a bike lane.
Gary, one of the things that has been brought up a couple of times in the last month or so has been downstream or upstream impacts, such as from a development that you just alluded to. And you mentioned about gaps that are created next door, which of course probably wouldn't want to fix because development's coming there fairly soon. But the gaps that exist maybe a couple of miles away that have been there since the 60s, those are some of the gaps that I think we have talked about having some concern for, and perhaps seeing if we can't cover some of those costs through impact fees in the future, legally, or if we'd have to change something in the statute.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Gary, those are really good examples, but I'm just curious, though, that applies really to our rural or semi-rural elements in that part of our network. That doesn't really correlate to our more urban cores of the county. So can you give examples of what infrastructure would be eligible for those types of facilities? Or right-of-way is not needed to be bought because they want to just work within right-of-way that we currently own?
President Commissioner Pickering, unfortunately, our capital improvements plan is for the needs that are necessitated by the new growth on our arterials. Many of the more urban developed areas, you've already capped what the roads will be based on our master street map. We're not going to widen the roads, so they're not in our capital improvements plan to be widened, so we can't spend impact fees on them for these those impacts, because we've chosen to not do anything with them. We and our partners have agreed these roads aren't going to be widened. We're going to live with the congestion in the future.
I guess that brings,
or do other measures.
so, and that's helpful that's a really helpful description, and I think that makes me wonder, then why aren't certain large projects that have seen a lot of growth, that are more part of our transit centers or infill, can't be eligible to be on the CIP too? Because there's still lots of changes that are happening, lots of investments in growth, but it's just not the same type of growth that might be happening in more rural areas. And people are still being impacted by that. Sorry, Gary.
Mr. President, Commissioner Pickering, it gets back to, we have to be able to measure, project, and assign this development is going to generate this many whatever types of trips or impacts, pedestrian trips, bicycle trips, vehicle trips, people trips, whatever we want to term it. We have to be able to measure that, have a unit of discharge of service that providing to the entire community, and this development is tripping us over that, so they necessitate whatever improvement. We don't have that. I mean, what we have currently is
That was going to be my next question.
travel
So thank
lanes
you
and
for that.
vehicle trips.
Right.
That's what we gotta change.
So thank you for that. That was going to be my next question.
So Gary, you recognize the frustration. So you say, we've already expanded Overland from Cole east. We've already expanded Franklin, Cole east. We're not gonna expand it anymore. Reality is, growth is putting more people on those roads. And they are making choices. They can't make very many choices. They have to go by car. And when they reach congestion, what they do is they then go to parallel roads, like Nez Perce and Kootenai and Rose Hill and Cache and other roads. So it is spreading out. So it is creating this impact. This is an impact of growth. But so that's why I say we have to think outside the box. That growth is impacting these neighborhoods. People are on those roads. Yes, we're not going to widen them anymore, but if we only think of we have to only use it to widen roads, we're actually making it worse, because we're saying we're going to keep widening further and further and further to the west and funneling more people on there, instead of thinking, what do we do to accommodate people efficiently in the existing right-of-way? The other is this notion that we're using money, lots of this impact fee money, to buy right-of-way for future parts of the bike network. But the issue with the bike network is the existing bike network has huge gaps. So it doesn't do us any good if we're spending a lot of money to buy these pieces out there. It's like we would never get away with building a road network that didn't connect with each other. And yet we have a bike network and a pedestrian network that doesn't connect with each other. And so what we do is we force people, you have to drive because it's just not safe. We do have a roadways to bikeways master plan, and that's the network. And yet the pieces of that network that if we could fix and make connected safely would be used more effectively. And yet we're not. We're saying, so to me, spending money on the bike network way out in buying right-of-way doesn't really count towards making the bike network function as a reasonable alternative. So we have to think outside of the box. Think outside of how do we use this right-of-way more effectively to meet people, the demand on that network. Since we're not so many parts of it, we simply aren't going to widen, and we wouldn't want to widen. We want to use it efficiently.
Jim, are you asking Gary and Steve to try and figure out if we can, what we need to do to make it so that impact fees can be put towards those sorts of things?
Absolutely, we have to.
Okay, good.
Definitions. Get away from those definitions that we are stuck on. And once we hit the wall and say, oh, the statute can only let us do this much, at least we've hit that wall. That's where I want us to go.
Right. Commissioner Goldthorpe, or President Goldthorpe, Commissioners, okay, so what changes can we make in the existing ordinance? Intersections, we could make them 100% eligible. We already include the existing lanes. We could say we'll include the sidewalks and bicycle facilities, because we can't build or expand an intersection without rebuilding those if they're already there, or building them new, especially a roundabout, because we have to get them up off the road onto the pathway. We could look at doing that. Rebuild of existing lanes on the road segments, we could treat them like we're treating bridges. If there's useful life left in the roadway, and the only reason we're removing it is to widen it for the capacity expansion, that a portion of the impact fees pays for the rest of the life of that pavement, like we're doing with bridges, we could do that. Miscellaneous items, the repair of landscaping, irrigation relocations, utility relocates that we pay for only because of the expansion, we can make those impact fee eligible. Those have historically not been, but there's no reason they can't be. That was more of a negotiated item in the past. Lastly, we could fund the unfunded list. The only reason we have one was to keep the fee at a certain level. You can fund the unfunded list and raise the impact fees. It would maybe be about a 12.6% increase.
Describe what the unfunded list is?
We have a list in our capital improvements plan, Commissioner Pickering, of projects that are not funded. We've funded all projects for right-of-way. We have a list of projects that aren't funded for design and construction. In the past, that was done to balance to what we had available in the general fund revenue to pay those portions of the costs. In the 2020 CIP update, we had far more general fund revenue than we needed, so that there wasn't a need for an unfunded list for that purpose. We have one just out of what we expected to reasonably collect out of impact fees and be able to actually fund and to keep that rate at a reasonable level. It only raises at $446 per house. It's not a tremendous increase. It would generate about $3.3 million in revenue a year if you chose to do that.
And Gary, that's based on a full build-out, the projected build-out of the comprehensive plans of the cities that goes all the way out to 2035, right? Or 2040. 2040, isn't it?
President Goldthorpe, Commissioner Hanson, yeah, it's not the full build-out of the city's comprehensive plans. It's what they've been allocated through Communities in Motion as part of that growth total and whatever they've told us they would grow by 2040.
By 2040. So it's actually not where growth is actually happening now in areas where aren't eligible. It's areas that might grow out by 2040.
Well, Commissioner Hanson, it's where the cities told us they would grow between now and 2040. They're not always right.
Right. But I mean, right now there's cities telling us we're going to grow in a lot of core areas, like Meridian's investing a lot in the downtown development area. Since none of that's eligible, we can't count that, but we can count projected growth down and on the county line south of Meridian and Kuna, right?
And President Goldthorpe, so some pros and cons
All
of these items. The intersections, pros, it's cost that's only incurred because of the expansion. Development communities generally very supportive of our intersection projects. Cons, some people may not agree with the increase in eligibility and increase in the fees. Rebuild of the existing lanes, again, it would pay for a road with service life that's still left in it that we're removing just to widen it. The con, it's very minimal impact. Generally, we're programming our projects to where we're near the end of the life of the road anyway, but there could be circumstances where we're having to rip up a road with some useful life left in it. The landscaping repairs, irrigation, utility relocations, again, they're cost incurred because of the widening. You know, it's a legitimate expense, and some fee payers may not agree with it. It would be a minimal increase, you know, in the 2 to 4 or 5% range. We can come back with what that number would be. And then funding the unfunded list, you know, it does generate additional revenue every year, about $3.3 million at our current levels. Could provide needed improvements faster if we have additional revenue. And again, the con, some fee payers may not agree with the increased rates, but we're still, you know, even at a $446 increase, we're still just under $4,000 a house. It's still a reasonable rate. So with that, we can schedule a future work session to follow up with some of the items that we discussed today and for any questions you may have.
Appreciate that, Gary. And yes, we probably should. I wouldn't suggest that it be any time between now and the end of the year, though.
Mr. President, Gary, could you send us your presentation so that we can have that for reference?
And Dave has been very patient. Said he
Yes.
had some comments,
Yes,
questions?
I have quite a number of comments. First of all, Gary, thank you for the presentation, and many of these suggestions I like, and I think would be very helpful. I'm not, at the moment, raising impact fees again is kind of iffy in my mind, in part because it's my understanding that impact fees were just raised by 11%. Well, I don't know if I say last year or the year before. In any case, not in the
Was-
budget that we just recently passed, but the year before that.
13 months ago.
Yeah,
Right.
last year.
Right.
Mhm.
So, so that's potentially problematic. But here's I've been thinking a lot about this subject since we first started talking about it, and I've concluded that number one, our concern about use of impact fees is a problem that has primarily been created by this commission itself. I mean the commission as an entity, and it didn't just start this year; it started previously. By diverting so many funds away from roadway projects and intersection projects and other projects that are eligible for impact fees, by pushing fees over into community programs and so on, that's why we have reduced our use of impact fees. That's how we have reduced our use of impact fees. Your suggestion about, increase the number of eligible projects, I'm all in favor of that. Your demonstration there showing that if we raised impact fees, we could get 3.3 million a year to fund these unfunded projects. Well, just this past year, we took 5 million and took it out of roadway projects and put it into community programs that aren't impact fee eligible. And every dollar that we put away from impact fee eligible projects reduces our ability to use the existing impact fees. That's why we have, I don't know, what is it, 8 to 10 million or something of impact fees that haven't been used this past year. It's because we keep pushing money out of the projects that are needed. Now, Commissioner Hansen has said many times that he wants development to pay for itself. I'm inclined to agree. So what are the impacts of development? By and large, 99% of the impact of development is more cars and trucks on the road. So the impact fees should be used to fund projects that increase our capacity to allow cars and trucks to move. That's where they need to go. That's how this system is designed to work. The impact fees and the comment or the concern that some developers apparently have that they pay impact fees and yet they're used for a project that's way over here. Well, that's the way the impact fee program is designed. That kind of complaint is kind of like people complaining that federal gasoline taxes that we pay in Idaho are used to rebuild the interstate in South Carolina. That's how the system is designed. And the projects are done on an as-needed basis, and the fund, those are fungible dollars. The dollars go in, they're not earmarked. Each dollar isn't tagged as it has to be used right here by this development. No, the developments bring growth. That growth is primarily cars and trucks. And for that reason, those funds are appropriately used for increasing our vehicle capacity. Even though, and I'm glad to see that there's an increase in bicycle usage and so on. The reality is the volume of bicycle traffic could go up by a factor of 10, and it still would not come anywhere near the capacity of the system we have. You're right, there are gaps in it, but the reality is if we spent all of our revenue for the next 40 years on bicycle and pedestrian facilities, we wouldn't be able to completely get it all together. And at the same time, we would be shortchanging all the drivers who, because of the way this county has been developed, have no choice, no option. Well, no choice. The reality is people rely upon their automobiles to get from place to place because we've got suburbia and strip malls. And gosh, it would be nice if the county were developed differently. But let's make one thing clear. It's not the roadway network that's driving development. It's the other way around, because we are so far behind. We're not building big fat highways out in the middle of nowhere and then it gets developed. No, it all develops with this 2-lane farm to market road that was laid out in the 1920s. And that road is completely, you know, at level of service F, and it's got to be widened because of the development. And we've got to do it here and there, can't necessarily do it all right here where this development is. We've got to, you know, we've got to look at it and take it piece by piece and develop the places that have the greatest need. And I hope, and we've talked about this, and I know we're going to talk about it in the future about our method for prioritizing projects. And in looking at that, I have a concern that we're not focusing as much as necessary on the level of service and total traffic. Those come into play, but I think they are diminished in their importance compared to a lot of other factors that have taken precedence away from that. Anyway, that's a slightly different subject. Let me get back to what I'm saying here. The increase in traffic volume of cars and trucks on the roads because of development is quantifiable. And let's be honest, this bicycle and pedestrian level of service concept that we have pursued is not a quantification of anything. It's entirely subjective. It's like the difference between the score in a basketball game versus the score in a gymnastics meet. The one is a judgment call. The other is who put the ball through the hoop the most times. One you can measure. The other is a judgment. We can measure cars and trucks. We can measure vehicles. Making a judgment about, you know, this sidewalk is good, this sidewalk is not good, this bicycle path is really good, I feel safe here. As nice as that is, I'm not saying that we shouldn't have that. That's an important thing to have to guide where we spend those funds. But because we have taken so much of the funding away from these roadway and intersection projects that need to be built and the widening projects, that's why we haven't been able to use all these impact fees. That's the problem we've created ourselves, we, the commission itself as an entity. Right now, according to my calculations, and we had a presentation earlier, but the numbers have gone up because of our new budget that was passed, it appears that we're spending something like 46% of all of our capital improvement money on bicycle and pedestrian facilities. Not that we shouldn't be spending money on those things, but 46%, that is way out of whack. It should not be at that level. And this idea of let's take these impact fees now and try to push them into all these other things will just increase that more and reduce our ability to expand the roadway network in this county based on the development. And the development that's happening, we can't control, we have to respond to. And we're 40 years behind, you know, the curve on responding to this simply because of budgetary reasons. And to continue to divert funds away from that for other things that we really like and that feel good to do and that help with safety and so on, that even though it's one of those things that sounds really good, but when you look at it and you run the numbers, you realize that's not the best use of our funds. Let me just end with one thing. So overall, some of these changes, some of these small changes that we can make, at first glance, I like them, and I'd be in favor of many of these. But not going to the length I think that Commissioner Hansen is suggesting, not anywhere near that, because the impact of development is primarily more cars and trucks on the road, and that's where those fees need to go. Now, concerns about bicycle and pedestrian facilities, let me just add this one final thing, and then I'll be quiet. So long as bicyclists and pedestrians share the right of way with motor vehicles, there will always be accidents. So long as we have imperfect drivers in imperfect cars on imperfect roads in imperfect conditions, there will always be accidents, not only with automobiles and trucks, but also with bicyclists and pedestrians. Some time ago, I saw a documentary about Walt Disney and his Epcot concept. The Epcot Center that was built was not his original concept. What he was trying to build was a city. You know, Experimental Prototype Community of Tomorrow. That's what EPCOT stands for. And the concept of the city was a very dense commercial center, commercial core, with residential all around it, and even some high-rise, apartment buildings inside. But in that core, you had 3 levels. The street level was only for pedestrians and bicyclists. Below that, all automobile traffic was on the level below that. And all truck traffic was on a 3rd level below that. The reality is that the only way we are going to ever prevent bicycle and automobile accidents or auto pedestrian accidents is to completely separate those uses. And gosh, that would be great, but the amount of funding required to do something like that is astronomical, and it's just, obviously, it can't be done. You could build a new city that way, but there's no way that we could do that here. There's just no way. And since that's an impossible imaginary thing here, right now, we've got to deal with what we've got right here, right now, which is a county that is primarily spread out, and people are using the roads for commuting and so on. And we've got to make the wisest use of the limited resources we've got and put them toward the biggest demand that we've got, the biggest needs that we've got. And even though lots of people want to have, improved bicycle and pedestrian facilities, and we are improving them, we've gotten lopsided in where we're putting the priorities. That's my 2 cents, and that's why I think we should not seek to make wholesale changes in the way the impact fees are being used. Some of these changes, yeah, I'm good with much of that. But to try to say, yeah, we got to be able to use them for transit and for this and that and the other, I think that is unwise.
Thanks, Dave. Before I forget what I'm thinking, I want to make one comment, and that is that 8 years ago, I might have agreed with most of what Commissioner McKinney just said. But in the last 8 years, I've spent a lot of time just tapping people on the shoulder and asking them what they would like to see us do with money. And I haven't tried to teach them about impact fees or anything else in the process. Just, hey, would you let your kids ride their bikes to school if it was safe? I've yet to have someone say no. I have also yet to have someone not tell me, in most cases, how unsafe it was. So that's where I developed my own personal philosophy that if we built it, they would come, meaning some, in many cases, as you've seen with some of these little asphalt facilities, that people are using them. And so that's, and I would agree, we don't need to have any kind of a wholesale overhaul of the impact fee statute or ordinance, that there's a few little tweaks that we're going to do, and away we'll go. And that's all I have to say, but I think we've, and I'll ask the director, who's out pacing like a father outside of a maternity ward, waiting for the sheriff. I'm guessing that we've probably ruined Brooks' chance.
No way.
Oh, here he is. We've probably ruined Brooks' chance to have a good shot at her presentation, at least right now, because the sheriff is due to start speaking to us in just a couple of minutes.
Let's hear from Brooke.
Yeah, Brooke was.
Wait, just a second. We have a schedule that's messed up right now, and I'm going to make a suggestion, and that isn't to put the sheriff on at 6. But I don't know if you can ask the sheriff when Bruce can find out how much time he plans on taking. If we plan on giving the sheriff the same courtesy we gave the police chief last week, I would suggest that we go ahead and begin at 5:30. We're not going to have an administrative report, as the commission already knows, unless we have questions, and that'll be handled after our regular meeting. But if Brooke could hang around and give this presentation after our regular agenda. Could you? Okay.
Very good.
And we
Thanks,
just
Brooke.
solved that problem.
worth waiting for. Thank you, Gary.
Director,
Sheriff,
can we, meet the sheriff a few minutes early?
I'm sure he'd be more than happy to do that, Mr. President.
All right. We're glad you're here. Much younger than your picture looks.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Okay.
Kidding.
How are you?
Good to see you.
Welcome to the Ada County Highway District.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the invite to kind of get.
We'd love to know more about you, so take it away.
Okay, I don't know how much you want to know, but just a real quick overview, and I apologize. Mary's probably heard this spiel a few times, but just a intro. I've raised in Idaho my whole life, raised in a little mining town in North Idaho, and came down to Boise in 1995 to attend BSU, and my wife and I never left, and continued to have our whole family down here. Started with the sheriff's office 21 years ago, and worked my way up through the ranks, starting in the jail, going up through sergeant position, which is first line supervisor, ran a canine, did a lot of drug investigation things, and ended up my last gig was the chief of police in Eagle. So, with the sheriff's offices, that's one of our contract cities. Then found myself here in July after the last sheriff vacated his position, and we had that really nice, fun little process that got me the appointment. So here I am. One of the things that work-wise that I always tell people, as far as the sheriff's office goes, I overuse the word culture over and over. I know I overuse it, but I'm very much dedicated to the sheriff's office, the product we put out to the public as far as service and making safer places for people to live, work, and play. Believe a lot in that, our vision statement, and I believe a lot in hiring the right people that fit into our culture, that gives service to the public that they deserve. That's kind of in a nutshell who I am, and I'd love to hear any questions you have about the agency or things that you want to pick my brain for.
Well, I have a comment, and that's that with the number of years that I've sat on the ACCEM with the sheriff, whoever the sheriff was at the time, I am amazed at what a tight working relationship that the Highway District has had with the sheriffs. And I know Brooke Green is one of the big reasons for that, because of what happened in 2016 and 17 with the winter there, and how tightly we were joined at the hip, trying to make sure certain really bad things didn't happen.
Right.
And I'll tell you, I was absolutely astounded and thrilled to see how that worked, and to have been a little teeny part of the decision-making processes there.
Right.
So I'm glad you're here.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yep, Mr. President, I have a couple questions. Sheriff, it's great to meet you. Happy that you're here and in your
Thank
position.
you.
I just have some questions. We had the chief of Boise PD here, and we talked a lot about just the things that he's seen, deaths, accidents, near misses, things like that. And I brought up and I asked him, how does he coordinate with you guys? And, of course, you guys talk a lot and work together, which is amazing. But I just would love to hear your thoughts and your observations, because obviously you're dealing with a more rural network. There's not a lot of good connections and safety for a lot of folks to get where they need to go. And so I would just love to hear your take on what are those themes that you see around near misses and accidents, and just how you work with us to remedy those situations.
So it's just interesting that you say the more rural, because I remember when I started way back when, it was, anything south of Overland was a stop sign, or maybe not. And even though we still continue to be pretty rural, as you go farther and farther out of the city limits, we see a lot more traffic lights, and a lot more traffic direction, traffic devices, which is great, and has, I think, significantly helped to not cut down our accidents, but at least per capita keep them down. So we've seen so much growth outside the city limits that we need those devices to help control traffic in a way that we didn't have to worry about in the early 2000s when, at 5 Mile and Victory, there was a stop sign and you'd have some crashes once in a while. Well, if there was a stop sign there today, we'd probably have a lot of big problems. So I think being able to see all those traffic control devices being implemented where maybe the public doesn't like it so much, oh boy, another light. But, the increased traffic on Highway 69 is a really great way to put that. You used to be able to hop on an Overland and you head down. You don't hit a light until you get to down. And I think today we're able to see into the future a little bit and say, well, with all the growth, we need a little more control of our traffic. So though we still have a lot of rural roads and some of them do have stop signs, putting those devices in has helped curb those crashes. Now, with the growth becomes more crashes because we have more people on the roads with cell phone use. And I try not to date myself, but I know I look younger in person, but we didn't even have cell phones as police officers when I started, and it was just simply inattention from driving. And now, that we see that tenfold with the use of cell phones. And it might be somebody looking in the mirror or looking down at their radio before, but now people that are surfing the web and texting, of course, I mean, all these things, but we've not only had the population that's grown, but the distractions inside the vehicle are just so much greater that we see so many more crashes. I don't know if we have more per capita, but with more people, we obviously have.
That's really helpful. Could you just illuminate, how do you coordinate with our staff on crash data or anything like that? Because Boise PD, they have a process. I'm curious if you have a process as well.
I believe we do have a process through our unit, or our data analytics unit. They're able to pull stats, actually pretty real time from our computer automated dispatch. And so if you came to me and said, hey, I would like you to tell me how many crashes you had in the last 12 hours right up until this hour, we would actually be able to tell you that real time. So our data analytics, they've upgraded software. They are using good techniques to pull data to figure out where are kind of our hot spots using heat maps and probably all of the same types of things that you use. We can bring that data to you very easily. And we're very cooperative with any agency to say, no, you have the data, can we have it? Something short of an investigation, if we have the data, then yes, please use it. Just had probation and parole come to us this week and say, hey, we know you have the data and we don't have the means to mine it. Will you help us? Well, it's a matter of public safety. Yeah, we'll go ahead and do that. We're not going to build a silo and hold our data for ransom. So anything you ever need where we can capture it, you will get it from us.
That's really helpful to hear, because I know we're going to be trying to, because the thing is, we know our staff are working with your teams and other folks, so that's exciting, but sometimes that doesn't percolate up to the commission level to inform our decisions about where should, our priorities be, or is it this intersection versus this intersection that should be rebuilt because of the number of crashes. So I'm sure as we design that process, we'll be connecting with you because your data would be very helpful for us to make better decisions.
Absolutely. And anybody that knows me knows I'm kind of a network guy. I think, I steal it from our chief deputy, but I live in the world of the criminal justice system, and we're just a piece of that system. And it's all about public safety. That's what the criminal justice system is. And so if there's a piece that improves public safety, like ACHD needing to know, hey, where are our hot spots here for crash? Does this traffic control device even work properly? We have that information, then you will get it. It's a part of public safety. So we're a small cog.
Love it. And which mining town are you from?
What's that?
Which mining town are you
It's
from?
this giant town of Mullen. So it's up in Shoshone County. About 800 people, pretty steady over the years. Not much growth for a very long time. But
I was gonna say, there's not many of us, I'm from Kuski, that make
Okay.
it down this way from North Central or North Idaho, so good to see somebody.
Yeah, I
Thank you.
usually get a little excited when people say they're from a mining town too. There's something about it. I don't know. Hardworking folks, blue
Yep.
collar.
Mr. President,
Yes.
if I may, Commissioner Pickering, I didn't want to cut you off if you still have questions. Oh,
Thank you.
Sheriff Clifford, it's great to see you,
Good to
as
see you.
always. I'm just so proud of you. As you know, I'm a strong believer in partnering and collaboration with other agencies and jurisdictions, and I know you are too, so I appreciate that. So in that vein, we really are looking to establishing that routine relationship with the Sheriff's Department and carrying that forward so that we can be a resource for you and vice versa. So to that end, with something like maybe, I know with the Boise Police Department, we've just started where staff is going to start attending their weekly briefings. Maybe we could have somebody, you or somebody from the Sheriff's Department come in quarterly, monthly, touch base with us. Maybe we can kind of define those roles, but I think we really are interested in having a very strong relationship with you and the Sheriff's Department going forward. So I think we could connect with Director Wong, the staff, and kind of figure out how that's going to look with our interaction with the Sheriff's Department, because I think that's critical.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly. And we've actually started to do that with some of our other outside stakeholders where we've seen a little bit of the, not relationships crumble, but you just start disconnecting. The one off the top of my head is, the prosecutor's office. We work so close. And Bennett and I sat down you and I need to meet monthly just to talk about, what the topics are that rise to our level. We do that regularly. We just have a standing meeting. I'm up for whatever.
I think that would be beneficial to do,
Absolutely.
and just how we can better help you and assist you, especially when it comes to enforcing ACHD policies out there with the speeding and the signage, et cetera. But it's just good to keep, because we overlap in what we do. And I think just to have that relationship, and if we can do something more on a routine basis. So I'm glad you're open to that.
Yeah, I'm probably a big fan of cementing something. We will go in once a quarter, or we will meet with a few of the commissioners once a month. I'm up for any of that. It kind of helps people schedule around.
Yeah,
instead of,
absolutely.
once in a while we need to make a connection. Busy with all of the vast things that we all do, and it gets lost, and you may.
Yeah, so it's good to know that door's open and we
Absolutely.
can continue to build those relationships. So thank you very much for that.
Tell you one thing, why I was very grateful to hear you talk about data and how quick you can not only mine it, but regurgitate it.
Yeah.
We had a situation I did where I needed some accident data for a particular area, and was given some numbers. That was the latest data, and I couldn't believe it because it's real close to my house, and I probably witnessed that many wrecks. And
Right.
I'm not sitting on the corner, And so the Sheriff's Department mined some data, and it turned out it was either 3 or 5 times what we had been told, because we went through the state system.
Right.
And that's, as you know, it might take a year.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you very much for
Yeah.
that.
No problem.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Sheriff, likewise, thank you for being here. It's great to meet you. Let me just sort of kind of to follow on Commissioner May's comments. Is there anything that ACHD isn't doing that you would like to see us do that would help out you and what you do, or anything that we're doing that we could probably do better, or maybe stop doing? Anyway, what can we do for you?
Well, the only things that come off the top of my head are the things that are the way that we work together that are really crucial for us, and that's usually in a time of crisis. I think it's easier to fix some things that I can't think anything off the top of my head that would be annoying or small, but the things that you do well off the top of my head are those times when we really need you, when we have large scale traffic crashes, areas where, hey, we're going to have to sit out here and direct traffic for 2 hours with 4 deputies, our calls for service coming out, crashes in other places, domestics, you name it. A little bit of a white knight when we say we called ACHD and they're sending some people out. I need you to know that's a big deal. It really is. When we can call for help, we're usually the people that come when people call for help. But when we need help and somebody arrives, that's the thing that comes off the top of my head. I can't think of anything where I would like you to stop doing anything or something that really needs mending. But at those particular situations,
Mr. President?
Mr. President?
Oh, I'm just, and I know time doesn't allow for it now, but I know just recently I had the pleasure of listening to you talk about new things that are happening in the department and new programs, et cetera, the drones. And if next time you come back, if you can kind of share some of those with the commissioner, I think they'd be surprised and quite interested as well. So I think that would be beneficial.
there's some interesting things that we do.
That you don't really associate with the sheriff's department.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, some interesting kind of almost fun things in the way we do our jobs that people don't sometimes realize. And with new technologies, technologies sometimes make it a lot funner, I guess,
Yeah.
in a police sort of way. But I'd love to share those things
Yeah,
with you.
that would be great.
Commissioner.
I think we started our drone Air Force about the same time you guys did. That about right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's fun to watch.
Yeah. It's a really neat program, our drone program.
Very much so.
Mr. President, yeah, thank you, Sheriff. Just a quick question. I wanted to just zone in on speeding, and I know it's the least sort of interesting thing for law enforcement because you're trained in criminal justice, and to stop speeders seems to be, oh God, I'm on, catching speeders, and a lot of it is because they're just a lot of times just normal people. They're not criminals.
Correct.
They're just they're sort of lured into or they get distracted into speeding on a road. I just want to reinforce that that is critically important data for us. And we got a pledge from the police chief. We want to hopefully get one from you just to say, give us the data on those areas, especially where there are children, where there's like chronic speeding, so that we can then help the cities and the county prioritize. This is really where we want to go. So even though it's the least sexy part of an officer's job, it is really important data. And I don't know what percentage of tickets you guys write that are speeding tickets. That's really important. And also, of course, I don't know how many schools you hang out, you're in, because a lot of the schools are within the city limits, or whether the city draws on you to do those or whatnot. School zone speeding is a particularly concern, and our eagerness to build schools in the old days, we tended to plop them right next to a busy road.
Yep.
and so so that's really, really important data to constantly share with us. So tell your officers, we super appreciate the work they do addressing speeding, because it's not entirely just some evil person who wants to drive fast. There's a lot of factors that come into play. Just like you say, there's so many more things that draw their attention inside the car instead of outside where people are walking. And unless we design the roads in a way that forces them to focus on it, otherwise they're going to hit the curb or hit a tree, then they're going through a 25-mile-an-hour zone at 35, 45. Maybe, or maybe not. 9 times out of 10, not. There's a sheriff's deputy back there with a speed.
Right, and you're correct. And we do spend a lot of time in school zones, especially in our contract cities. So that's where we see most. We do have some schools in our unincorporated areas, but especially at the beginning of school years, a large call for officers to be sitting around school zones doing traffic control for good reason. Just like you said, people, especially in school zones, they speed quite a bit. Every time I drive through one, I think it's like 200 feet that you have to slow down. You can speed back up when you're on the other side. But I think, and we can also mine some of that data on how the officer codes the call. But I think in the future, you'll probably see a little bit better data for CUNA and Eagle, where Eagle is the only part of the sheriff's office that has dedicated traffic enforcement officers. So that's what they do all day in lieu of an emergency or something where other officers are taking other calls. I certainly can't speak for the mayor of CUNA, but the rate of growth that they have, I would say they probably start looking at traffic control officers as well. So you'll see that increase at the sheriff's office in our contract cities. And then, of course, as this growth, I mean, that's the key word, right? And we'll probably see that in unincorporated as well. We can keep that data, like I said, in ways. It depends on how easiest measured with citations, not as much with warnings. But we can get some of that data and get it to you.
That would be great.
Mm.
I know there's parents groups out there who would like to see, at least in school zones, some automated ticketing. I'm sure you guys would love that because that's much less labor intensive.
Right.
It's like there should be absolutely zero excuse for you to be speeding and get caught on a camera.
Right.
You got to pay the fine. Just expect it if you're in a
Right.
school zone. But we sort of like, no, we want to spend the money to put officers out there, even though they might be. Yeah, that is going to be very, very helpful.
Yeah, I can get you as much as I can. That, like I said, citation's the easiest way to get you that.
Yeah.
Oh, unless there's anything more, I'm just thankful that you've been here.
Well,
Thank
I
you.
appreciate your
reasons.
support. Thank
Absolutely.
you for having me.
Thanks, Sheriff.
And if you have any questions, whenever, doors open, and anybody, a lot of great people in the agency that can answer all kinds of questions, but I'm happy
Appreciate that.
to, right.
Thank you,
very
Sheriff.
much.
Appreciate all you do.
Folks, I know what has gone into what Brooke has for us since the last time that we had anything to do with this particular study and all the different loose ends and pieces that are part of it. So, Director, maybe instead of waiting until after the meeting, we could ask you any of the questions about the administrative report now. Be okay? Could find out if anyone had any questions about it. Mary, Dave, Alexis, Jim, did you have questions
No.
for the director on this?
I don't know how long Brooke's presentation was. I don't know if this is enough time for Brooke.
It's a busy afternoon.
It is. No police were hurt.
Yeah. I guess we don't.
Well, very good,
It's your
Commissioner.
lucky
Thank you. I
day.
greatly appreciate the opportunity.
There
Thank
you
you.
go.
Thank you for coming.
Yes, thank you for coming. We've got 14 minutes till we start.
Well, no, can we get started on Brooke and then?
Yeah.
Might as
continue?
well.
And then maybe,
Okay, I just know for a fact I don't want to shortchange her, because,
no.
really.
Actually, I hope not.
And we can continue
Oh.
questions afterwards, too.
You guys know where to find me. Hey, well, it's good afternoon, good evening. It was afternoon at 4 o'clock, but it's a pleasure to be before you. For the record, Brooke Green, Transportation Planner within Projects and Planning. I'm before you to introduce our Capitol Boulevard Concept Study. You can anticipate during my presentation, I'll quickly go over a little bit of history, where we've been with this project before. As this is an ACHD's first time visiting this, I'll also go ahead and give you an overview of some of the concepts back in 2015 that we examined, although it's not necessarily the only projects we'll be looking at moving forward, and then just conclude quickly with the actual schedule. Where's my little clicker? All right, quickly to go over the planning area. It is all of Capitol Boulevard, no further north than the Greenbelt, and no further south than Rose Hill Road. However, there's a couple things. We have some important connections that we're going to fold into this project. That will be the connection to Federal Way, existing multi-use pathway, as well as the connection up onto Crescent Rim. There are several new attributes that are coming in. You've got Shoshone Bikeway, but you've also got the city's desire for a connection into Albertsons Park. So our stakeholder core team, I do want to highlight all the folks that we've brought to the table. And this core team certainly participates in our discussions as we move forward. BSU, CCDC, as this part of this is in the Urban Renewal District, Valley Regional Transit, City of Boise, as well as several neighborhood association representatives. You've got Southeast Boise, Depot Bench, the Lusk District, and we have invited a Central Bench. They held an election last week, And so now we know who their leadership is and certainly invited them to the table. So why Capitol Boulevard and why now? So ACHD heard the desire from our partners and expedited this project. We moved it forward as soon as we could. Hence, while I'm here today to have this great conversation. But as I highlighted when we first opened the discussion this evening, this isn't the first time ACHD has visited this location. Back in 2015 is when we kicked off our first Capitol Boulevard concept study, where we examined this area for both bikes and pedestrians. We went 2 years. We had quite the robust public outreach, and I'm going to talk about that later in this presentation. However, this project was requested to be tabled at the city's of Boise's request. It enabled them to have further discussions with BSU and some of BSU's original concerns. Since then, there's a lot that's transformed in the area. 2016, we added the Royal Park Boulevard extension, as well as the Lusk District crossing. Those were 2 items that were in that Capitol Boulevard concept study. 2018, as we've talked about several times, we had the Bike Master Plan update. It was in that update that we identified bike facilities for Capitol Boulevard. 2021, the City of Boise, as well as BSU, highlighted this as their #1 request. But Valley Regional Transit, if you removed all of their State Street projects, this also makes it their #1 request. So all of our partner agencies, Boise, BSU, as well as VRT, has identified this as a project that they'd like to see move forward. 2021, as you're well aware, we've had several important adoptions. The adoption of the Livable Streets performance measures, as well as the Commission direction on arterial bike facilities. The area has had quite the transformation since 2015. We have the Lusk District development, as I highlighted, the Shoshone Bikeway. We've seen the Royal Boulevard extension, but there's also been some land use changes. We've seen BSU Visual Arts Building go in place, as well as BSU University's Drive Concept Study. All that development has created lots of bikes and lots of pedestrians trying to traverse through this area, and that's what we're hoping to address as we move this project forward. Our previous concepts, as I mentioned, we kicked it off in January, February of 2015. At that time, we went through several public outreach efforts. I will say this project was one of the first ones I got a glimpse of ACHD. It was my first year on the job, so it was really great to see this project and to come full circle and actually work on it. However, June of 2017, we had the draft concept report, and at the time, the ACHD Commission at the time did not adopt it. They, at the request of the City of Boise, they tabled. However, in 2017, as I mentioned, our public outreach, we did identify several public priorities. You'll see the importance of items to address listed there. Safer university crossing, bike walk conflicts, blue being not important, yellow being very important. However, since 2017, this is what we've got still outstanding. And that's what we hope to address as we move this project forward. Initial concepts. So in 2015 through 2017, when we were doing that outreach, we had lots of concepts on the table. However, just like all of our projects, we try to whittle it down to a couple. These were the 4 running projects. You had the center running bike lane, the one-way protected bike lane, the shared use pathways, and then the 2-way protected bike lane. However, it was 2 that we would like to go ahead and take back to our team. I do want to highlight, we are bringing these back to the team, having that discussion. It doesn't just preclude them from looking at other projects, but we definitely want to take into account what has occurred back in 2015, what the public said, and then bring these 2 projects forward and then initiate that conversation once again. So the one-way protected bike lanes, this is, you've got the bike lanes on both sides of Capitol Boulevard from the Greenbelt all the way up to Rose Hill. In this one, you're going to see the realignment of Crescent Rim Drive. That's to help facilitate both those crossings that you can see, the yellow being the crossings. In this iteration, you do see the Royal Boulevard at this, this aerial shows that Royal Boulevard wasn't built at the time. It is now built. And then you see the Island Avenue crossing. What does this proposal look like? It removes the 3rd southbound lane. It's replaced with those 2 protected bike lanes on both sides. This does require the shifting of the median location. Now, a lot has changed, and so we are re-examining this as an option moving forward, but as I highlighted, this isn't just the only 2 options the team can look at. Moving on to the other one, the shared use pathway. You'll see different here as we do not have the realignment of Crescent Rim. However, we have a shared use pathway on both sides of Capitol Boulevard from the Greenbelt all the way up to Rose Hill. In addition, in both of these iterations that I provided to you, we are going to complete that connection to the existing Federal Way multi-use pathway. In this, you see all the crossings, but what you don't see, as I highlighted, is that crescent rim realignment. So what does that look like with the cross-section? So the sidewalks are widened on both sides to provide for that enhanced multi-use pathway. So it's not at grade with the road, but this is a separation. What you see here in this cross-section is not the recent adoptions of our MUP guidelines that are going through draft. I'm sorry, it's not adopted, but the MUP guidelines that are in draft. We're going to have to make some updates to this, because in 2015, the direction from the staff is certainly different than what we're receiving today. And so while you have these cross-sections in front of you, do realize that we're going to have to go back through those iterations one more time to ensure that they do adhere to the standards you guys have put. The crossing projects, I highlighted that. There are 2 crossing projects at Island Avenue Crossing, which we've completed, but it's the University Drive North Side Crossing. And why that is important and why several of the students highlighted this is if without that existing north crossing, folks who want to get to that corner where there's a university bookstore, there's I think a Subway over there, they have to cross 1, 2, 3, 4 times to get to that corner. And so this University Drive Northside Crossing is still in the running, is still a discussion point with this team. Project objectives. Certainly it's to increase ADA compliance. We want to ensure that this whole corridor is adherence to our recent adoption of our ADA compliance. We want to look at this as a mobility arterial for all users, bikes, peds, and also recognizing vehicles still have to traverse through this area as it is the main corridor into the downtown. That improved connection to our newly formed Shoshone Bikeway, improved connection to the Federal Way multi-use pathway I highlighted, and then lastly, that improved connection to the Greenbelt. Project schedule. So we're certainly in fall 2021. We have our core stakeholder meetings. We have had a conversation with the BAC. I presented to them already. I have a BSU presentation to their vice presidents on November 2nd, the PAG presentation on November 18th. I'll be back before the public in May of 2022 for some more public outreach, core stakeholder meetings throughout this whole process to look over these iterations. And I hope to be before you in August of 2022 for consideration for adoption. That concludes my presentation. I'll stand for any questions.
You know, the thing I remember most, I'm sure some folks here will expect what I'm going to say, was we put up that fence up the middle of Capitol Boulevard because of all the jaywalkers. And then a couple of friends of mine in the police department, and they have cameras at that substation. They watch some of the leapfroggers still.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Has that jaywalking diminished very much? Do you know?
You know, honestly, President, I'm not necessarily sure that I could attest
Oh,
to
good.
change, but I like to think it has.
'Cause
I've
I
seen
remember
the
we
video.
spent about
Check the log, yeah, that's
$65,000 on
Not
that
nearly as
fence.
many.
I've seen the videos and they're pretty nimble. So
Yeah, nimble. That's a good one.
Brooke, great presentation. I was able to watch your BAC presentation, and I really just enjoyed. I appreciate you inviting the Central Rim and all that good stuff too. So thank you for doing that. And I really enjoyed their questions and appreciation for this project as well. So just great job all around. And I just one takeaway that I took from that presentation was their sentiment around the one-way bike lanes and just how the enforcement of that would be kind of tricky. And as somebody that has gone to BSU, I know that it would be hard to, again, the crossing, if you're coming from campus, to have to cross over to then get on the correct way to go up the hill would just be a little bit of a deterrent. So looking forward to seeing the process and how you guys design it and what you recommend, because it's not going to be easy, but just my thoughts, and thank you for doing this. This is exciting.
sure thing.
President,
Yes.
and Brooke, I just add, thank you. This is excellent, much better, and even more comprehensive. And I would suggest we include in that the crossing at Rose Hill, because when you sit at the corner of Rose Hill and Vista, there are a lot of people on bikes and walking who will cross to the other side to go down, because that's the way in which they go down. It is just as wide and dangerous there, and perhaps even more so, because the road comes up and down. And what that does for drivers is they're looking up, they see a green light, and flipping through trying to race a steel green or a yellow. So I think the crossing distance can be addressed. Also, the northbound traffic on Capitol becoming Vista or turning on Rose Hill comes very fast. It's unnecessarily wide at that point. Reconfiguring that to tighten up those corners to really enhance the safety of the start of the whatever system then moves down the hill. I would suggest we include that intersection analysis of the effectiveness, because if it becomes too dangerous at that intersection, a lot of what feeds into it won't be safe, won't feel safe. Thank you.
Thank you, President. Commissioner
President,
Hanson
may I
will
ask-
look into that.
Can I ask just one question, quick question? In the option you showed us that has the shared use pathways, just for my information, why is the realignment and reconnection of Crescent Rim Drive not included as part of this option? Is it because of a median or something like that?
So let's go back and look at the one-way protected bike lanes. There was a lot of folks who need to be able to cross. So if you're coming off of Crescent Rim, and to Commissioner Pickering's point, we need to give them the ability to get to the other side to go down on the appropriate protected bike lane. These are one-way in both directions. And so that's why that crossing there is so critical and why they have to realign it. In this case, let's go back to the shared use pathway. It's not as important to give them that opportunity to cross to get to the appropriate bike facility. They can get on the multi-use pathway and continue down into the core of the University Drive.
Ah, great, thank you.
Sure thing.
Mr. President, I just have one question. The separated bike lane, would that be like the ones down on 8th?
Yes, that is exactly what, President, Commissioner May, yes, to your point, it potentially could look like that, although I don't want to preclude what the team's going to look into.
Sure.
At the time in 2015, when these concepts were put forward, these renderings, we didn't have that protected bike lane that you have on 8th Street right now, and so certainly that's something that we can explore as an option, and I'll leave it to the team to help us with that guidance.
But that's kind of the concept that would be presented. Yeah,
Yes.
I do like those. Those are nice. Brooke, always, thank you so much. Impressive. Look, I'm excited to see this project progress. So thank you for enduring and waiting.
For sure.
It was worth it.
Oh, my husband.
Okay.
Well, he's waiting for me somewhere.
Somewhere.
Thank you, Brooke.
Thank you. Take
All
care.
right. Well,
I'll tell him it's his boss who delayed us, so.
Okay, well, thanks again,
Thank you.
and we'll see you again soon, I'm sure. Folks, it's 6 o'clock, so we're going to go right into our regular commission meeting, and we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance if you join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Again, welcome to our regular weekly commission meeting. We're going to do something slightly different because usually at 5:30 I ask the commission if, as a whole, if they have any questions or comments or concerns about our agenda. And what I'm going to ask them to do is, when I ask for a motion to approve the agenda, which will be just here in a minute, that they ask those questions if they have any at that time. So is there a motion to approve the agenda as written?
So moved?
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, then we'll go into the consent agenda. And items on the consent agenda are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless a commissioner or citizen so requests, in which case the item will be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda. All consent agenda items are commission action items unless noted. We have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
President, I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. So we'll go into the regular agenda items, which also are action items. Our first item is the South Meridian Neighborhood Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan, which we've been talking about for some time. And Edinson but tonight we're going to be requested to adopt it. And so Edinson, take it away.
Evening, Commissioners. My name is Edinson Bautista, ACHC Senior Transportation Planner. This evening, I'm presenting to you the final recommendation for the South Meridian Neighborhood Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan. We spent the past 9 months in the community of Meridian, identifying opportunities for enhancing bike and pedestrian facilities. Staff is confident in the process and the plan produced, and recommends the adoption of the South Meridian Neighborhood Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan as written. The South Meridian planning area is shown in this slide. The light polygon delineates the planning area, which follows the city limits south of I-84. During the October 20th Commission work session, staff provided an overview of the tools used to collect public input and the results of each of the efforts. Summary, the public outreach effort consisted in 3 main components. School outreach, which surveyed a total of 297 students, an online comment period, which collected a total of 122 comments, and an online open house, where staff presented to the public the proposed project list and collected input from 40 participants for bike projects, 19 participants for pedestrian projects, and 20 participants for crossing projects. Overall, through this neighborhood plan process, we received a total of 535 comments. The plan identifies a number of bicycle and pedestrian improvements, including the low-stress bikeway projects, bike facilities along corridors like Victory Road and Locust Road, sidewalk projects throughout the South Meridian area, and crossing projects at key locations like Locust Road and Palermo Drive, Lake Hazel Road and Discovery Park, and crossings at major roadways where the low-stress bikeway intersected. South Meridian Neighborhood Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan is a project identification tool. Projects will be evaluated in program as part of the Integrated 5-Year Work Plan and the budget process, in close coordination with the City of Meridian and West Ada School District. Staff recommendation is to adopt the South Meridian Neighborhood Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan as written. With this, I conclude my presentation. I'll stand for any questions.
Commission, any questions or comments for Edinson?
No?
Right, then I will ask.
Mr. President, I just want to say thank you, Edinson. Great presentation, and I would move that we adopt the South Meridian Neighborhood Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan as presented.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That was quick.
Good work session.
You did such a good job last time.
There's been a lot go on before this, though.
Thank you, Edinson.
Now, item number 2 will be the Rose Hill and Owyhee Street, Overland Road, and Vista Avenue concept studies, again, for adoption. And so, Christy Enselman will be giving us the final report.
Maybe just Rose Hill and Hawaii.
Right. Good evening, Mr. President, Commissioners. For the record, Christy Enselman, Senior Transportation. So I am here this evening to go seek adoption of the preferred concept for Rose Hill and Owyhee intersection. Just as a reminder, so we were here a couple weeks ago to talk to you about this intersection. So this concept was developed because there were issues at the intersection, and those were safer crossing conditions for bikes and pedestrians, with a need for increased visibility. Some additional items that came out of our public outreach were requests for slower vehicle speeds and an improvement of turning movements. So for the public outreach, we did have quite a few stakeholder meetings. We held multiple online surveys, as well as public involvement meetings, with 68% overwhelmingly saying that this intersection needed some improvements for those that walk and bike. The recommended alternative is a mini roundabout with RRFBs, which is a rectangular rapid flashing beacons. And the benefits of this design would provide pedestrian safety, bike safety, motor vehicle safety, as well as it's compatible with all of our adopted plans. The current schedule in the integrated 5-year work plan is to design this project in fiscal year 22, which we're in now, right of way in 23, construction in 24. The last time I came to you, the commission also wanted staff to explore looking at doing a concept study for the corridor. So what we would look to do with your direction is doing a pilot study to look at temporary traffic calming measures. We set the extent from Rose Hill, from Roosevelt to Vista. And the reason we set it that is that's the predominantly residential component. And we can look at the other more commercial elements on another concept, but we wanted to focus first on the residential component. So the purpose of this study would be to enhance that corridor for all users. The concept study and whatever consulting firm, well, the consulting firm we will use, which we likely do Kittleson, that worked on this intersection, would be to identify a variety of potential temporary / semi-permanent, we can't just go put cones out there, traffic calming solutions to calm traffic and mitigate speeding on that corridor. That concept study would anticipate a level 2 bike facility as identified in the bike master plan for Rose Hill in the future. And the design of those measures would need to be supported by the neighborhood, including but not limited to different types of traffic calming measures like chicanes, center medians, lane narrowing, a variety of things the consultant would be looking at with regard to designing those temporary measures. So we have that pilot study set for fiscal year 22. So we would start right away, in essence, done. So staff is seeking approval of the Rose Hill and Owyhee intersection concept study with the approval to move forward with that pilot study for the temporary traffic calming. Sorry, I walked really fast over here, so I'm like out of breath. But I'm here, and I will stand for any questions.
Christy, I appreciate this. At the risk of having another motion brought up very quickly, I want to let the commission know we do have one member of the public that would like to speak to us today about this, and one online on the Zoom. So, we have anything for Christy?
Remind me that construction would be
Mr. President,
24?
Commissioner Hans, yes. The year for construction of the roundabout would be 24. And then we would seek on the concept study for those traffic calming measures. Obviously, we would talk to you about what the cost would look like for that type of thing, and likely try to incorporate that at the same time that we're going in and doing that with.
Mr. President, I have a sort of a procedural question. Item number 2 on our agenda also includes the Overland Road and Vista Avenue concept studies. And item 3 is Overland Road and Vista Avenue concept study update. What's the difference between those two, and what, make sure I understand?
Yeah, Mr. President, Commissioner McKinney, there should just be one additional concept study. This one, there's no update for the Overland and Vista, it's just the preferred adoption.
I just want to say thank you for,
I think it's a typo.
I just want to thank you for your patience and awesome work in our work session, and I'm looking forward to hearing public comments.
All right.
Thank you.
So we will have some public comments now. We have Jim Pickett, if you'd come up and give us your name and address, and about three-ish minutes. But you can take the mask off if you'd like.
All right. President Goldthorpe, Commissioners, my name's Jim Pickett. I live at 3501 Windsor Drive, Boise, Idaho 83705. I'm a member of the Depot Bench Neighborhood Association, but not speaking on their behalf, but I am relaying ideas that they passed on to me. We didn't have a resolution for this or anything. So I'm speaking primarily as a citizen who lives a block and a half away from I'm voicing my concern on the design option selected, I'm worried that it doesn't meet the desire to improve pedestrian safety at that intersection. The selected design option, I can't find anything in my travels in Boise that is really comparable to this intersection. It's unique, and drivers are going to be confused when they get to it. I'm afraid they're going to take, not go around the roundabout because they're expecting a large roundabout. They're going to take left-hand turn before the island, or the roundabout island, or they're going to do some other odd behavior that pedestrians are not going to, erratic behavior that pedestrians aren't going to expect. It seems like the design is being used as a beta test for maybe other parts of the city. I'm also concerned about the pedestrian crossings. They're quite a ways back away from the intersection now. The problem I see with that, the visibility of the pedestrians to the vehicles and the vehicles to the pedestrians. You now put the pedestrians out of the sight of the vehicles as they come down Rose Hill, and they can't see them as they make a right-hand turn from onto Owyhee, either direction. The design's a major engineering event with lots of hardscape install and landscaping, and if things don't go well, it will result in much more cost in removal or renovation. And while the public approval for the two designs was essentially the same, the selected mini roundabout design had much more public opposition than the simple bulb-out design. There were 9 people who did not approve of that design for the roundabout versus 1 for the bulb-out design. I do appreciate the commissioners adding a more thorough review of traffic calming on the corridor. I think that also goes into the previous presentation, which wasn't part of this meeting, but it is interesting nonetheless because the speed starts going up the hill on Vista Street, and it just continues down the whole corridor through that which is a residential area. Thank you for listening, and I stand for any questions.
Questions? Thanks very much, Jim.
Thank you.
Yes. Stacy, you have someone online to address us?
Yes, we have Nina Schaefer.
Welcome,
Hi.
Nina.
Hi, thank you, President Goldfort and Commissioners. I currently live off of Peasley and Rose Hill and am a commuter of all modes along this corridor, including biking, walking, driving, and public transit. I do frequently run into conflicts along Rose Hill due to the high speeds and blind spots that impact visibility between vehicles and pedestrians on both ends. So I want to express appreciation to you and the staff and the consultants for going forward with the traffic circle recommendation, as well as adding the Appendix E to develop a temporary concept plan for Rose Hill. I think the two of those together is a lot stronger than the one, just the traffic circle, as Jim mentioned. I think it alone won't solve a lot of the problems we see on that road. And I think an example of that would be the crossing that we have on Peasley and Rose Hill. We don't see a strong improvement of people speeding or stopping for pedestrians on there. So I am supportive of this traffic circle and the Appendix E, and I hope to see you guys pass it. And I do want to add a quick aside that somewhat relates to this. Recently on that Peasley and Rose Hill intersection, there was a button that was broken. And so it was allowing it was making the audio speak, but it wasn't signaling the lights. And I learned about this because my partner was nearly hit in the crosswalk thinking that the lights were on after hitting the button and hearing the voice activation. I contacted TELUS, and Brock Love and his crew addressed the problem very quickly, and I really appreciate his efforts on that. And I think with this intersection, as well as the traffic circle and whatnot, we'll see some great improvements on this road. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
I have a quick question for
Yes.
Nina. It just triggered my thought. So the at that intersection with Peasley, Shoshone, that sort of offset, there's a RRFB, the yellow flashing beacon. And that's what's being proposed also for Owyhee. Do you have an opinion on that, or whether it should be the more enhanced, hawk, which is the 3 red lights that come on and basically stop traffic.
Sure. Between the two, I would always choose a hawk, especially on Rose Hill with the high traffic volumes. I think hawks are a lot more appropriate. I find myself with the RFBs having to be a bit aggressive and like really either as a pedestrian or biker, I have to kind of like put myself into the curb area to really make sure people stop for me. We still don't get people stopping on that Peaslee intersection, which I think is why the voice tells you be careful. People may not stop even though they are legally required to. So I think a hawk system, no matter the project, is great. And then I think the traffic circle, I've experienced them in other cities and I find them to be really pleasant, especially in neighborhood areas. And so that's why I think the traffic circle with the temporary calming measures will show great improvements on this road.
President?
Yes.
I just have a question for Christy. Could you pull up the aerial of it too, just so I can see to Jim's point about how far away the crossing is? Just a time. Yeah.
You put me on. Start it from beginning, that would. This is the existing intersection. No signalization currently. The roundabout he's talking about, it's a little bit further back here, but it also would be every single leg would also be RRFB. So it wouldn't just be the Rose Hill side, the Owyhee side would also have.
Anybody else, Stacy?
Yes, we have Cynthia Gibson.
Cynthia, welcome.
Hi, President Goldthorpe and members of the commission. How are you this evening? It's nice to see all of you. My name is Cynthia Gibson. I live at 2004 9th Street in Boise. I don't live in this neighborhood, but I have spent some time walking along this corridor and I fully support this design. I am really thrilled to see this. I think a mini roundabout in this intersection is ideal. I think it will improve pedestrian safety and I think it will slow motorists down. I'm also really excited to see about the temporary traffic calming. And I think that this corridor, the volumes and the speeds are high. In order to manage those speeds, you do need to have multiple areas along the road to slow those cars down. So doing temporary traffic calming is a great way to see what's going to work. So I fully support this project. I'm excited to see it. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
I don't have any, Cynthia, because I actually agree with you.
Thank you so much.
And we do have one more.
One
Mr.
more.
Scott Sword.
Scott.
He has a presentation, he said.
Howdy, folks. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. If you give us your name and address, then you'll have 3 minutes.
Super. Good evening, folks. My name's Scott. I live at 3220 Kipling up here in Depot Bench. And so I want to share something really briefly, just to piggyback on the concerns around the Peaslee intersection. During the summer, I did a walkthrough with the commissioners, Jim Henson and Alexis Pickering. And one of the things that we walked through was just how treacherous that intersection can actually be. And so I put together something I'd just like to share with the commission to just kind of like underscore some of those items. I drive out of this street at least twice a day. And I would say that it is kind of gut wrenching a little bit every time I have to pull out here. So here in this picture, I'm facing towards the left turn as I'm southbound. And this is the intersection, to be clear, the intersection of Rose Hill, and Peasley. Now, the problem with this is that you have this tremendous blind spot if you're trying to head, take a left and head east towards Vista. And so I pulled up on Google Maps to actually crunch some numbers here. And this green box represents usually where you would stop based off where the marker is for the crosswalk. And so with that, you get about 135 feet of visibility. And from the time that you'd be able to see a car and where it would arrive to where you're at is about 3 seconds approximately. Now, as you are sitting right there and you're trying to pull out, that gives you, if you count in your mind, okay, I look, it's clear left, 1,000, look right, 1,000, and then to go back to the left and to pull out, that gives you just enough time to pull out into oncoming traffic. And that's assuming that folks are driving at 30 miles per hour on this road. Oftentimes folks speed. So it's just, you got to dart out there and just pray someone doesn't T-bone you. The second image I have right here is really kind of, and if you stand at this intersection and watch it for a moment of time, you'll see most folks pull past and block the crosswalk in order to get an extra 30 more feet of visibility, which buys you about another second's worth of safety to pull out. Overall, this entire intersection feels pretty dangerous and pretty broken. I have 2 daughters, and as they get old enough to drive, like I might have to instruct them to just simply not pull out of here. And I'm, to be honest, I'm surprised that we don't see more accidents in this area. And I just wanted to bring this up to the commission, and just as much as I brought it up to Jim and everyone else when we were doing the neighborhood walkthrough, because it's something that when you really kind of see it, when you're there, you can really get an idea of just like how blind and dangerous this intersection really is. And it's further exacerbated by other obstructions like cars parked or overgrown bushes and stuff like that. So this is more anecdotal commentary, but that's just something I thought would be beneficial to share with the commission tonight. And thank you everyone for your time.
Hey, Scott, I do have a question for you, and that's if you have any comments about the item at hand.
About the traffic circle?
Yes.
I do not have any comments about the traffic circle.
Okay, thank you.
President, I appreciate Scott having those
Well,
pictures.
this was not for the item at hand. I would rather not have this as a discussion item right now.
Actually, it's item Appendix E. One of the spots on Appendix E. In fact, Christy and Director Wong joined me and Cynthia.
Okay, then go ahead.
And we observed the same thing. So I had shared your information with Christy, and not the photos, which are much better, with Christy and the director. So one of the spots where we definitely need kind of temporary traffic calming that is contemplated in Appendix
That's where I thought this would be addressed, yes.
Yeah, so this is exactly why it's so important to do this work, and I think why I so appreciate Christy, I appreciate Commissioners May and Pickering insisting that before we go forward with this, we address this first, and this is a traffic example of why, if the traffic is coming off of Vista at those speeds and you can't see it at Peasley, by the time you get to Owyhee, it's going at a speed that the traffic circle may not. So there's a critical crossing there, and then there's going to be another crossing a little further down. And I appreciate Scott, you bringing in this data.
I just want to echo that. Thank you, Scott. I just really appreciate it, the visuals, just the work that you've done in that, and not to completely copy what Commissioner Hanson said, but it helps elevate the importance of the entire corridor. So,
well, you're welcome. Appreciate the time.
Questions or comments? Is there anybody else to address us? So then the matter is appropriately and properly before the commission for a motion discussion.
Close the public hearing.
Yes, thank you. I will close the public hearing before we do that. So since it's closed, let's do that.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Just a comment. A concern was expressed about the mini roundabout concept, and that it was kind of a test installation. Just for information, we have lots of mini roundabouts all over the city. I don't know the exact number, but I'm familiar with several, and we've got lots of them, and they actually work very well. And in fact, the mini roundabouts are the least complicated ones for drivers to get accustomed to, because it's just, it's all right turns, and they work very well. And so I think this is a great thing. So I would be happy to move that we approve, adopt the Rose Hill Street and Owyhee Street concept study.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
I just wanted to offer a little debate and say thank you. What I really appreciate, and I think we can deal with this so efficiently now, is the really good discussion we had. I just want to really appreciate that. I think it was Commissioner May's suggestion that this be incorporated, and it was, and to move forward rather than to pause. And I really appreciate, Christy, you spending the time out there with me, the director, with me, after neighbors, and I know Jim Pickett was one of those neighbors, and actually see and feel what it's like on the ground, and then to say, yeah, let's move forward with developing these concepts, because I know Kittleson's done this stuff before. This is their expertise. I don't think it'll be difficult for them at all to analyze. And I know that there's going to be lots of information from the neighborhood, and I'd be happy to pass it on to Kittleson to make sure they incorporate this. I would highlight, I think that will get to Jim's concern, which is my concern too, which while there may be roundabouts in the county, there aren't these smaller, in tight urban context, traffic circles. The only ones I'm familiar with were on Northview back in the 90s. People didn't like them. They weren't dealt with, and yeah, people did turn left in front of them instead of around them, and so they have to be designed in a way to make that very difficult. And the regular roundabout, you can actually steer the lane to the right. It's a little harder with the traffic circle. So what I'm hoping is the design of the traffic calming, speed management features, cars going towards it as they race off of Vista and have to slow down, or if they race off of Franklin and have to slow down, they'll be prepared by the time they get there. They're only going 25, so they can navigate it, and they'll look up. Guess what? There's people in the crosswalk. So I agree with Jim's concerns, and I'm hopeful by working with the neighborhood on the traffic calming, we can address those. Because the visibility, those are the things you said, increased visibility of pedestrians, speeding traffic on Rose Hill and Owyhee, and turning movements at that intersection, all three of which can be addressed with the traffic calming study. And I look forward to a presentation. I hope we can. I would hope, from my question to Nina, you probably heard me, that we don't completely eliminate perhaps the possibility of because of the volume, the use of a hawk at that point. Because like the sound on the RRFB, they say, you may cross, but people may not pay attention, whatever the language is. They may still not do it for you. Whereas we're trained, when we see those 3 red lights flashing, most drivers are trained, I need to stop, look around, where are the people, and then move on. Whereas the flashing yellows, they're almost like, by the time they react to it, they're already in the intersection. I just want to appreciate that we went through this process. Really appreciate Commissioner Goldthorpe scheduling this for a comprehensive discussion so we can move forward. I think a much better solution for the corridor and for the neighborhood.
I would agree. And since it's been moved and seconded that we approve item number 2, and I would ask that we have a vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Then the motion carries. We'll go now into item number 3, and Christie's not going to move even an inch.
I might turn.
Which is the Overland Road Vista concept study update and adoption. And yes, this is also a public hearing. Christie.
Okay. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm here again for the Overland and Vista concept study, preferred alternative adoption. Again, Christy and Simon. PhD. Again, just a quick reminder of why this concept study came about is there's an intersection there that has what's called a free-ish running right with residential homes that directly access an arterial network, which has created issues with access to those homes. There's an accident history on this free-ish running right. There was visibility issues for pedestrians and cyclists, and the turning movements were not great because it didn't the other end. So similar to the last presentation, we had public outreach where we met with quite a few stakeholders, which in neighborhood plan or neighborhood groups, the residents, business owners in the area. We held 2 online surveys and a public involvement meeting with the overwhelming majority saying that 60% saying that safety is extremely important to address at this intersection. So the recommended alternative is for a frontage road, which would take all access from off of Overland, and it would improve, this particular project would improve all of the pedestrian ramps on all 4 corners. It would provide a wider sidewalk adjacent to, or where the free-ish running right used to be 10 feet in width. We would relocate the bus stop to the south side of the intersection, which is actually preferred by VRT, who was on our project team. And then it would just be one access point for those residents rather than multiple, and give them a safer option. So it's currently in the schedule for design in 24 and construction in and staff's recommending that alternative, and I will stand for any questions.
Questions for Christie?
President, one question.
Sure.
Did we, remind me, in our discussion of this previously, did we resolve the concerns about snow removal on that shared access driveway?
Commissioner or Mr. President, Commissioner McKinney, it would be treated similarly to a local roadway where that's on the lowest priority.
As a practical matter, it's going to be the residents' job to plow that in case of major snow.
Anybody else?
Thank you, Christie. No.
Thank
you,
Christie.
Christie.
I just want to echo on the record my concern that, because, you know, it's a full block of development, commercial development on the other 3 corners. Matter of time, and have it basically a private driveway to residences. Ultimately, I assume they'll get grandfathered in if somebody buys all those and makes it commercial. They'll get that free driveway, although they may petition us to vacate it. At least have emo access off of Overland that the other 3 corners don't have private, publicly. Mostly because we're trying to fix that decision that was made back when there were residences on all 4 corners. That was the east-west highway. There was no interstate.
Yeah.
Overland.
Are there any other questions or comments? There's no one. Is there anyone here in the audience that would like to address this item? That being the case, we will close the public hearing, and the matter is now properly before the commission for a motion and a vote. Discussion 2.
Mr. President, I move that we adopt the Overland Road and Vista Avenue concept study.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, the last item on our agenda tonight is public communications. And is there anyone in the public here or on the Zoom that has any item they would like to discuss with us? Seeing none, meeting is adjourned. 6:38.